Very urgent, your soulmate made a mistake and time is running out to fix it. My beloved child, stay exactly where you are for one more moment, because what you are about to hear is not arriving by accident. There are moments that seem ordinary until you discover they were quietly changing everything behind the scenes. This is one of those moments. Somewhere, beyond the noise of daily life, a single decision has already begun sending invisible ripples toward your future. You have been wondering why certain thoughts refuse to leave your mind, why familiar memories suddenly return without invitation, why your intuition keeps whispering that something unfinished still exists. Those feelings are not here to confuse you. They are asking you to notice what has remained hidden in plain sight. Stay with this story until its final line, because every piece connects to something larger than it first appears. Imagine standing at the edge of a path covered in morning mist. You cannot see where it ends, yet every step reveals another piece of the journey. Life often works the same way. Long before answers become visible, subtle signs begin appearing. A song. A dream. A familiar name. An unexpected silence. None of these seem important alone, but together they form a pattern. The people who overlook these moments usually believe nothing is happening. The people who pay attention realize that life often speaks quietly before it speaks clearly. Now consider this carefully. What if someone connected to your future recently made a choice they immediately wished they could undo? Not because they stopped caring. Not because they wanted to walk away. But because fear moved faster than honesty. Sometimes people hesitate for only a few seconds, yet those few seconds create weeks of distance. One misunderstood message. One conversation left unfinished. One opportunity allowed to disappear. Small moments can cast surprisingly long shadows. The strange part is this. Most people spend their lives believing destiny only moves forward. Yet destiny has another side. It also waits. It pauses. It gives people chances to recognize what almost slipped away. That pause is often invisible, which is why so many miss it completely. Perhaps you've noticed that something feels different lately. The energy around your days has shifted in a way you cannot explain. Conversations feel incomplete. Certain memories return with unusual clarity. Even when you try to focus elsewhere, your heart quietly circles back to the same unanswered questions. Instead of resisting that feeling, ask yourself something deeper. Why now? Why not months ago? Why has this awareness arrived precisely today? Questions like these rarely appear without purpose. They are invitations to look beyond appearances. Sometimes the greatest turning points don't announce themselves with loud celebrations. They begin with a gentle realization that refuses to leave your thoughts. Stay a little longer. Because this story has only opened its first door. Far away from where you stand today, another heart has also been replaying moments that once seemed insignificant. A conversation remembered differently. A goodbye spoken too quickly. A silence that felt easier than vulnerability. Looking back, they have started seeing details they completely missed the first time. That realization changes everything. People often imagine mistakes as dramatic events. In reality, the biggest mistakes are usually incredibly quiet. They happen when someone assumes tomorrow will always provide another opportunity. Tomorrow feels endless, until one day it suddenly feels precious. This is why awareness matters. The future rarely changes because of luck. It changes because someone finally understands what truly mattered all along. Think about the seasons. Winter never argues with spring. Spring never rushes summer. Everything unfolds when its time arrives. Human hearts, however, often try to outrun their own timing. They hide feelings that should have been spoken. They postpone conversations waiting for a perfect moment. Yet perfection rarely appears. Only honest moments do. And those honest moments have extraordinary power. What if this season isn't asking anyone to become someone new? What if it is simply asking both paths to become clearer? Notice how often life removes distractions before revealing direction. The waiting that once felt frustrating begins making sense. Delays become preparation instead of punishment. Silence becomes space instead of absence. There is wisdom inside every pause. The challenge is recognizing it before impatience convinces you to look away. So don't let your attention wander just yet. The next piece of this journey reveals why timing itself has become one of the most important characters in this story, and why what seemed like an ending may have quietly become the beginning of something no one expected. My beloved child, take one slow breath and notice what has been quietly changing around you, because the next truth does not arrive with noise. It arrives with recognition. There comes a point when the heart stops asking, "What happened?" and begins asking, "What can still become possible?" That single question changes the direction of everything. Stay close, because this is where the hidden pieces begin fitting together, and by the end of this message, what once felt uncertain may suddenly appear in a completely different light. There is an invisible distance between regret and realization. Most people think they are the same. They are not. Regret simply looks backward. Realization looks backward, and then gathers the courage to move forward. Someone connected to your path has recently crossed that invisible line. For a long time, they convinced themselves that remaining silent was easier. They believed enough time would eventually erase every unanswered feeling. They distracted themselves with routines, responsibilities, and endless reasons to delay what their heart already understood. Yet something unexpected happened. Instead of fading, the memories became sharper. Instead of becoming weaker, certain emotions became impossible to ignore. It was not one dramatic event that changed everything. It was hundreds of tiny reminders. A familiar place. A familiar laugh remembered out of nowhere. A quiet evening that suddenly felt incomplete. A sentence they wished they had spoken differently. Life has an unusual way of placing mirrors in front of us exactly when we are finally ready to see ourselves honestly. That is why timing matters. Sometimes awareness arrives long after the mistake was made, yet precisely when the opportunity to grow still exists. Pause for a moment and think about this. Have you ever reread an old message and discovered an entirely different meaning than the one you first understood? The words never changed. You changed. Perspective has extraordinary power. The same is true for people. The version of someone who made that mistake is not always the same version standing here today. Growth often happens quietly, without applause, without announcements, without anyone noticing. While the world continues moving, hearts continue learning. And sometimes, the lesson arrives just before the final opportunity disappears. That is why this message feels different. It is not trying to pull you toward the past. It is inviting you to understand the present with clearer eyes. Stay with me just a little longer. Because the next layer explains why every delay has carried a hidden purpose. Imagine two travelers walking through the same forest from opposite directions. Neither knows the other is nearby. Trees block the view. The path curves unexpectedly. More than once, they almost cross paths without realizing it. Then one day, the sunlight reaches an opening in the trees. Suddenly, both paths become visible. Nothing magical happened. The forest didn't move. The travelers simply reached the place where they could finally see. Life creates moments exactly like this. For weeks, months, sometimes even longer. Everything seems disconnected. Then clarity arrives all at once. The waiting begins making sense. The unanswered questions find their missing pieces. The silence reveals that it was preparing understanding, not creating distance. Perhaps that is why your intuition has refused to become quiet lately. Not because it wants you to overthink. Because it wants you to observe. There is a difference. Overthinking creates fear. Observation creates wisdom. One closes doors. The other notices the doors that have quietly been opening all along. And here's something many people overlook. The strongest connections are not measured by how quickly everything happens. They are measured by how deeply both people grow before the next chapter begins. Growth is rarely comfortable. It asks difficult questions. It removes old assumptions. It replaces certainty with patience. Yet every meaningful transformation begins there. If this message has found you today, perhaps it is not asking you to chase answers. Perhaps it is inviting you to become ready for them. Before we continue, if these reflections are bringing you clarity or encouragement, consider subscribing and becoming part of this journey. If someone else might need these words today, sharing this message could brighten their path as well. And I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment with the word "ready" if you're choosing patience over fear, and let's continue this journey together. Because the next chapter reveals something even more unexpected. It uncovers why certain moments cannot be forced, why every heartbeat has its own perfect rhythm, and why someone may finally be preparing to do what they once believed they never could. The path ahead holds a revelation that changes how every previous moment is understood, and you won't want to miss what comes next. My beloved child, don't close this chapter yet, because the quietest moments often carry the loudest answers. You have walked through every piece of this journey one step at a time, and now you are standing where scattered clues begin forming a complete picture. What once looked like coincidence starts revealing intention. What once felt like waiting begins revealing preparation. Stay until the final moments, because this part changes the meaning of everything you've heard so far. There is something remarkable about time. People often imagine that time only takes things away. But time also returns understanding. It returns courage. It returns perspective. Most importantly, It returns people to the truth they were unable to see before. The mistake your soulmate made was never simply about one decision. It was about believing that silence would protect both of you. For a while, that belief seemed reasonable. Silence feels safe. It asks for nothing. It risks nothing. But eventually, silence becomes heavier than honesty. Every day that passes without speaking begins to feel like another page left unwritten. And when enough pages remain blank, even the strongest heart begins asking difficult questions. What if I misunderstood everything? What if I let fear choose for me? What if the opportunity one was protecting was actually the opportunity one was losing? Those questions cannot be ignored forever. They echo. Quietly at first. Then louder. Until they become impossible to silence. This is where transformation truly begins. Not when circumstances suddenly become perfect. Not when every obstacle disappears. But when someone finally becomes more committed to truth than to comfort. That moment changes lives. Perhaps you've noticed something inside yourself changing as well. You are no longer searching for dramatic signs. You are paying attention to quiet certainty. You are beginning to understand that genuine connections are built through patience, wisdom, and honest choices, not through rushing, guessing, or forcing outcomes. That realization is one of the greatest gifts anyone can receive. Because clarity does not shout. It whispers. Only those willing to slow down ever hear it. Stay with this thought. Imagine watching the sunrise from behind a mountain. For a long time, everything remains in shadow. Someone standing there too early might believe the light is never coming. But the sun has been rising all along. The mountain simply blocked the view. Life creates similar moments. Progress often exists before proof becomes visible. Growth begins before anyone notices. Healing starts before anyone speaks about it. Sometimes the most important changes happen completely out of sight. And then, one morning, the first ray appears. Suddenly everything that felt uncertain begins making sense. Not because the journey changed overnight, but because your perspective finally caught up with reality. This is why rushing rarely helps. Every meaningful chapter unfolds at its own pace. Not too early. Not too late. Exactly when understanding is strong enough to carry it forward. So if your heart has been asking whether patience still has purpose, the answer is yes. Patience is not empty waiting. It is quiet preparation. It is choosing wisdom instead of panic. It is trusting that every lesson you've learned is shaping you into someone who recognizes lasting connections instead of temporary emotions. And perhaps, someone else has been learning those very same lessons from the opposite side of the story. Different path. Different pace. The same destination of understanding. Before we reach the final chapter, I'd like to gently invite you to become part of this growing community. If this journey has spoken to your heart, consider subscribing so we can continue exploring messages like this together. If someone came to your mind while listening, share this video with them. It may arrive at exactly the right moment. And in the comments, write, "I trust the timing," if you're choosing hope, growth, and patience over doubt. Your words may encourage someone else who needs them today. Because one final piece remains. The last chapter reveals why this story was never truly about a mistake. It was always about what someone chooses after recognizing it. And that final choice may become the beginning of an entirely new path. My beloved child, this is the final piece, the one every earlier moment has been quietly leading toward. If you've stayed with this message until now, it isn't because of chance. It's because something inside you wanted to understand the story beyond the surface. And now, the picture is complete. Throughout this journey, we spoke about a mistake. But perhaps the greatest surprise is this. The mistake was never the ending. It was the beginning of awakening. Life has a remarkable way of turning our greatest lessons into the foundation of our brightest chapters. The people who grow the most are not those who never make mistakes. They are the ones who recognize them, learn from them, and choose a different direction when the opportunity appears. That is where true strength lives. Not in perfection, but in transformation. If your soulmate has reached that place of understanding, then something important has already changed. Not because destiny suddenly rewrote the story, but because awareness rewrote the person. And when people change, their choices begin to change. Their words become more honest. Their actions become more intentional. Their future no longer looks like their past. Remember the image of the sunrise? The light was always moving closer. The darkness simply couldn't reveal it yet. Your own journey works the same way. Perhaps you have spent too much time believing that unanswered questions meant nothing was happening. Yet behind every quiet day, character was growing. Patience was strengthening. Perspective was expanding. Even when you couldn't see progress, progress was quietly taking place. That is why today is not a message about fear. It is a message about possibility. Because possibility begins the moment someone decides to become wiser than they were yesterday. Before this story comes to an end, let me leave you with one thought that may stay with you long after this video finishes. Imagine reading the final page of a book before reading the chapters that came before it. Nothing would make sense. You would miss every lesson, every turning point, every reason the ending mattered. Life is no different. Sometimes we ask for the final answer while still living through the middle chapters. But every chapter has a purpose. Every delay teaches something. Every challenge shapes something. Every pause prepares something. And eventually, the story reaches the page where everything connects. Maybe that page is closer than you think. Not because anyone can predict tomorrow, but because every day gives us another opportunity to choose understanding instead of assumption, courage instead of hesitation, and hope instead of doubt. Carry that truth with you. Wherever your path leads next, don't allow impatience to convince you that your story has stopped moving. Keep becoming. Keep learning. Keep believing that growth is never wasted. Because the future belongs to those who continue walking, even when the destination hasn't fully appeared yet. And if this message encouraged you today, I'd love for you to become part of this community. Subscribe so we can continue sharing these uplifting journeys together. If these words reminded you of someone, share this video with them. You never know who may need this encouragement today. Finally, leave a comment with the words, "I choose hope," because your message may become the light someone else has been searching for. Until we meet again, walk forward with confidence. Choose kindness over fear. Choose wisdom over haste. Choose growth over regret. And remember this: sometimes the most beautiful chapters begin only after someone finds the courage to rewrite the previous one. Thank you for staying until the very end. Your next chapter is still being written. And perhaps its most meaningful page has not been turned yet.